This is for the fighters for change. Oppression would win if they were to give up. Our collective wellness depends on their tireless determination, and legalization's slow burn wouldn't be smoldering without them. They break down stigmas, build up equity, and just say yes. Yes to good troublemaking. Yes to being empowered. Yes to fair access. Now more than ever, Weedmaps says yes and stands with the fighters for change.
Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to Green Enterprise. We are presenting information, education, and empowerment conversations presented by Weedmaps. My name is Wanda James, and I will be your moderator today, and I am the CEO and founder of Simply Pure. We were America's first licensed dispensary owners. And today we're going to be hosting a conversation around raising capital, something that everybody asks about for your cannabis startup. Today we have with me Douglas Gordon of CannEx Jamaica and of Silo Wellness, and Rumi Odally of Cure Brand. Gentlemen, we would really love to hear about what got you started and give us some little background information. Let's start with Rumi.
Sure. Thank you, Wanda, for having me, and thank you to Green Enterprise. My name is Rumi Odally, and I'm with the Cure Brand. We make products for consumers in CBD space. Our parent company, Horticulture Co., is in the broader wellness space, but Cure is a brand that focuses on functionality and what people use CBD for. So we have, products that help with focus, sleep, and chill. I personally got into cannabis for personal reasons. I started using CBD myself to manage pain associated with psoriatic arthritis. And it just so happened that I had two childhood friends that had launched the Cure brand. So it was a great way to get involved personally and to do something that also had a mission behind it. So yeah, that's my story.
Nice. Douglas?
So I founded CannEx Jamaica in 2016 when Jamaica decriminalized and then put a legal infrastructure around the medicinal side of cannabis. CannEx has grown over that time to, last year 2019, we hosted about people from 37 different countries. So it's really become a platform that brings people from around the world to talk about cannabis here in beautiful Montego Bay, Jamaica. So I encourage everyone to come visit us when we come back. Later on this year in September. And then I also hold the position of CEO of Silo Wellness. And Silo operates in the psychedelic space where we operate retreats in Jamaica and in Oregon. We also have a line of functional mushrooms, as well as we do psychedelic products out of Jamaica. So we've been doing that. We're about to go public in Canada.
That's fantastic, and congratulations on that. And congratulations on just being in Jamaica. I think it's the only place in the world right now which may be warm. However, I think that everybody has, when I speak to people about, when folks ask, well, what got you into the industry and what's the best way to run a company and what are some of the things that we should be looking at? And what we find is for every entrepreneur, the path to growing your company, to getting into the industry, and to raising money is always different because it's based on the owners and what their focus has been. So can you both give me a little bit of background on what you did before cannabis and what moved you into this cannabis space?
Sure, I can start there. So before I got into the cannabis space, I was working in finance. So I had a background in raising money for large financial institutions. And then through a number of personal connections, I started raising money for startups. And that really exposed me to the startup world. And then when, I've been watching cannabis since I was in high school, honestly. So that's going to date me a little bit. But I knew that this moment was going to come both, legally, but also culturally. So watching the industry was really a really good way to see it from a passive perspective, but then really getting into the day-to-day operational stuff of it. And I know Douglas will comment on this too. It's a different story when you have your hands on and you're running an operation. And that's really where I think you learn a lot about, the tricks that are, the issues or challenges that face all companies. But specifically in this space, right? I think that's something that we learned very early on with Cure. When I first became involved with the company, I saw this as a huge opportunity that had a long runway, but it also needed the right people in the space, right? So I was really excited when I was able to, to come into the space, work with a great team. And that's really what makes our company, we went from being a product on on a PowerPoint to being in 1,000+ stores, right? So it's really quite a journey, and I'm gonna write a documentary about it. I think I've got pictures of like the craziness that we went through, and I've been documenting it in my journal. But yeah, it's gonna be worth at least a book or a short article, I think.
Long article.
Yeah.
Well, thank you both, for that information. I think it's important that entrepreneurs know that there is not just one path to starting a business and to raising money and to being successful, that there are numerous paths to get there. But one of the things that we all have in common on this phone is we operate as minority owners of businesses. And it's going to be an interesting conversation, Rumi, in having this with you, and also in having it with Douglas, that comes from a country that is predominantly Black, but still working in the global field of being one of the few minority owners globally. But here in the US, as you know, Black and brown ownership, people of color, is not something that we have seen in cannabis. Can you talk a little bit about how you like to take your company when you're raising funds and when you're talking to people about what you do? Is being a minority owner and founder, do you find that as being something that attracts people to your business, or is it something that you have to, I hate saying explain away, but that you have to explain to folks? And how is that working for you in this industry?
No, that's a great question, Wanda. What I think I noticed early on in this process is that, raising money for a startup is not easy at all. But raising for a cannabis company, especially if you're sitting across the table from investors that don't necessarily look like you or share your same life experience, is always a bit of a challenge, right? So there is that element to it. But I would say that now we've noticed a much better focus on finding women and people of color in this space and really supporting them, right? So from a personal standpoint, diversity is weaved into our entire business, but from an outward facing investor perspective, we really celebrate the fact that we're a minority owned organization, that we have a real focus on the communities that we work in, and then also that the people that are using our products are, come from very diverse backgrounds, right? Both socioeconomically, or, from the perspective of geographically across the country, right? So I think it's a good thing to have in the conversation, and to think about. But I can tell you that it's not easy to raise money, one, in this space, and two, it's not easy to do alone. So finding people that have done it before and that are leading in this way is really helpful, and you can learn a lot from other people out there.
So Rumi, exactly. That's, I think that people need to really understand that raising money is difficult no matter what the situation is, right? No matter how big you are, how small you are, whether you're Black, whether you're white, whether you're man or woman, it's a difficult process, right? But it's interesting though in cannabis, because last year, what we saw here in Colorado were the sales for dispensaries during COVID went up substantially. And they went up tremendously for minority-owned products, minority-owned businesses, and even for our business, Simply Pure. People were looking to be a part of investing in and purchasing products from minority-owned companies. Did you find last year that you had more people asking about your company and how to invest in your company? Did it seem a little bit like the doors opened in a way that they had not been opened in the last decade?
No, definitely. Last year, I think, saw two things. One, an increased demand for products, right? So whether they be THC or CBD, or just general wellness products out there. I think what you saw in Colorado is really proof of what the potential is for this category. And the other thing I saw, and this is something, Wanda, I think you can maybe comment on too, is people really care about what's behind the product, right? So if you're buying, a tincture or, a vape product or whatever it is, whatever form factor you enjoy, consuming, you really care about who's behind that product. What are they putting in the product? Do they operate ethically? Do they share the same values as you? Because at the end of the day, we vote with our dollars, right? By me saying I will only buy from minority owned and women owned businesses, that's, a clear decision that I've made personally, right? And I think we'll see that across the board for people who really care. And I think that will also drive some of the investor conversations as well, because whereas last year I had a ton of really great conversations and met really good people, this year I figured out that there are certain people who share the same values, right? Investors who really want to make a difference, and that to me aligns perfectly with what our missions are, our core values at Cure.
That's exactly it, and it's interesting too when we start looking at the new consumers that are coming on board, i.e. the millennials, and we're seeing that they actually do support businesses that are doing good while doing well, right? Which is why you see things like socks being popular, or Tom's shoes. The idea that you can buy one and give one, right? Or that what you're doing is actually changing how we view our world and making our world better. Do you think that cannabis and cannabis products and CBD products are uniquely situated in a place now to really talk to the idea of this is we can make some things better by investing in minority-owned businesses, and especially in this space? Is that something that you're seeing as you're out there speaking with people?
No, definitely. I think that people understand, one, that there's huge potential to build this industry where it has wider adoption, and people know and understand the products out there better. But on the flip side, I think it's also raised awareness about the social issues surrounding cannabis, and I think that's been a great thing. And I think what we're going to see more of, especially in I would say the next year, as more states adopt either decriminalization or legalization in some form, we're going to see conversations about how to tie the economic impact of this business to the social impact of it.
Absolutely. Douglas, I'm going to bring you in now. I'm going to go back a little bit so you guys can weave in these questions, what we've done with Rumi so far. So,
sure.
So Douglas, it's been—
Wanda, can I just touch on that question?
Oh yeah, please, absolutely.
Can I answer to that question first? Yeah. Is that okay?
Yeah.
I feel to just piggyback on what Rumi's saying, I feel that we have an obligation in cannabis to do it differently. I think that, where this industry has been carried on the backs of so much sacrifice, so much injustice, that it's not a function of how do we do, diversity and inclusion to the same formulaic approach as normal corporate America. We have an opportunity here across the globe to lead with cannabis and really figure out how to include people from the ground up who have been sort of, marginalized for so very long. And that's why I use the word obligation. I think that's what we have to do. And I think we have to hold ourselves as an industry accountable. And I think we have to hold those companies that we define as leaders, whether that's by market cap or, the number of retail outlets that they have open. We have to hold them accountable, because we didn't just arrive here with some great idea. This was built over hundreds of years of work and effort, in the last 40 years in particular, a lot of sacrifice, and that has to go for something.
100%. I want to go back a little bit though, and I do want to talk about, I'm going to ask you a question specifically that kind of feeds in. So, Douglas, it's interesting to me that, social equity and minority involvement is such an important conversation here in the US, because so few owners of color have been a part of our industry. But when you look at an island like Jamaica, which is my heart and soul, by the way, I love being down there for all types of reasons, cannabis being one of them. But when you look at an island like Jamaica that is, prominently Black, what are the barriers that we are seeing in Jamaica for more and more Jamaicans to become a part of this industry, to be able to have the funding to do the growing and to work with the Rastafarians or the entrepreneurs on the island to be able to make this an equitable industry, even in a country that is predominantly of color?
Well, I think part of the challenge has been a lack of real education about the economic prospects of the industry. So, what you have in Jamaica is a much more conservative by nature population. It's ironic that in the Caribbean and Jamaica as well, there's less sort of tolerance for cannabis and ganja and all this sorts of thing that you'd expect versus like places like the United States. So that's a learning curve that has to be navigated still in a substantial way. The other component to it is, in that educational process, you're going to bring in business leaders, government, you're going to bring in sort of the capital sources you typically have, but you still have to address this inequity. And that inequity comes down to a lot of the folks who are passionate about cannabis. This is what they've been doing for so many years, and they want to participate now that it's legal. There's a knowledge gap, there's a resource gap, not just in terms of capital, but in terms of the team, in terms of the human capital to build out some of these enterprises. Because cannabis is, as you would know, I mean, you've done this, you're a pioneer in this, you've blazed the trail. It's a lot more complicated than people think. It's not just jumping into an industry, because it's an industry that's still defining itself. And then it's businesses that are trying to forge a path forward while learning how to operate in a highly regulated environment. So there are a lot of complex, elements to it. And I feel that it's I'm always a person that says, look, what can I do now by myself? How do we actually approach this? And I think that I would love to see a few more companies locally that are addressing the knowledge gap that they have prior to pursuing the finance gap that they have, because finance with the wrong knowledge is still going to be a disaster. So you still have to have those two pieces in play.
You know what, that's a really excellent point. And, we're definitely talking to owners of color on this particular panel. However, you just really nailed the idea that you need a team, a knowledgeable team, to be able to raise this money. Even if you are somebody such as Rumi that comes out of finance, you can't do this by yourself. Isn't that correct? You have to have numerous people around you from numerous understandings of not just the plant, not just cultivation, but the whole idea of what it takes to be able to have the right people in place at the right time to grow this business, to be able to give investors a sense of confidence in what it is
Comfort.
that you.
Yeah. No, Wanda,
Absolutely.
I think that's 100% right. So, for an example, one of our founders is a pharmacist, right? And another one has a beverage background. So we have two really, really smart people on our team that put together and built a product. And when you're building products for consumers, that's the number one thing you need to instill is trust and transparency, right? So we were the first product to put, QR codes on all of our products. We went out there, we talked to, to the consumers. We're working on getting into mass retail, right? That's our benchmark. But on the flip side, we also want people to love and get to know our product, right? So that's really a big part of it. But I agree with you, Wanda. It's something that is often lost in the conversation. You see a lot of people raise a lot of money, and then you think about like their backgrounds. A lot of them may not really have the right backgrounds. They may not even come from this space, right? I think it's interesting. If you look at least the publicly traded companies, you see a lot of people who have entered the cannabis space who have no real connection to it, other than the fact that they see the huge potential, which is what Douglas was pointing out, right? So it takes a lot to run a company. No one does it by themselves. The people who you really admire, at least in this space, are the people who have been the OGs, the people who've been here for the longest, who know both the early stages of this business, but then also see where it's going.
That's exactly it. And Douglas, can you talk about the difficulties of creating that team when you are literally building your business on a relatively small island? I mean, it's a good size island, but when you are creating a global business, because the one thing that I do love about Jamaica is it looks at what it can do internally, but Jamaica also eyes what it does externally as well too, right? So how do you build a global to make that work?
Well, one thing I will also say before I get into that specifically, Wanda, is I think a big disconnect in this industry is folks not understanding that at its core is an understanding and appreciation for the power of the plant. You know, I came in from a non-cannabis perspective. So, you know, my whole exposure to business is about very tangible elements, you know, that have a sequential flow and that you can analyze and understand. What I've come to appreciate about cannabis is if you do not respect the plant is going to have the last word. I don't care how much capital you raise. I don't care what, you know, how talented your team is. But fundamentally, if you do not understand that there's something different about this industry and give the plant its due, it's a recipe for disaster. But in terms of building a team, you know, again, that word authenticity has to flow through the organization from top down. You know, just like in any other business, if you're going into it purely to make money, right, it's not going to work. You're not going to, I mean, you might make money, but you're not going to make a fraction of what you could otherwise have made if your objective was bigger than that. And cannabis allows us a platform to do things that are much bigger, much more substantial, that impact lives in a significant manner. So you have to build a team, first of all, that has the relevant competencies. You know, you have to have your legal, your finance, your regulatory, you have to have the skill set to grow. But from my perspective, if you do not have a real authentic, you know, vein that runs through your enterprise about the respect for the plant and the people who have brought it here, you're going to fail. But, you know, to come back to the sort of tangible elements, you know, it's like any other business. You have to sketch out all the different competencies that you need, and you have to find the people who can fill those roles. And you have to be strategic. You have to be clever. If you don't have a lot of money to pay folks, then you have to give up some equity. You know, and I think what's hampered some of the enterprises that have tried to get in is, you know, they don't have that broader perspective to say, you know, I need someone with this background. And if I can't afford to pay this person, what are they worth in the open market that I could say, you can have a piece of my company, you know, let's grow this together. And then, you know, again, it's a sort of mindset I say sometimes, like, you know, what frustrates me a little bit in Jamaica sometimes, I say, you know, there's a crabs in a barrel mentality sometimes. You know, we're fighting to see if we can get that dollar. But the reality is if you get, you know, 90% of that dollar, it's 90 cents. You know, if we work together and we grow that into $100 and $100,000 and a few $1 million, then we can start to compete with each other. But in the meantime, until you have market penetration, until you have a governance environment where the government in power, the business community understands the tremendous opportunity that cannabis holds for education, for social justice, for income equality, to move yourself away from, you know, reliance on exports and simply tourism to where you're now able to save tons of foreign currency because you're not spending it on overpriced pharmaceuticals that, you know, essentially are there to perpetuate you buying more pharmaceuticals to offset those side effects, and so on and so forth. And you're actually giving people jobs and you're giving them the ability to sort of chart their own course forward by having their own businesses. When you actually understand those things, then you'll see more people supporting it and you'll see less obstacles and, you know, a smoother flow. And one thing I just feel I must say is I think the most important thing in this industry is resilience. You know, I spoke to authenticity and I think that's key. But the number two thing is absolute resilience. Doesn't matter how smart you are, doesn't matter how much capital you come in, if you don't have that trait or the ability or the desire or the openness to develop it, again, you're going to be flummoxed because of all the different obstacles that come in your way. But the reality to me is when you keep in your mind the number of people whose lives you can impact, you know, the number of folks who, you know, the grandparents who can't really play with their grandchildren because of the aches and the pains, and you now have a way that they can get a cure for that. They can get a pain-free existence that's safe for them. You know, we have to move on those things. We have to be focused about those things. We have to support getting these businesses there so we can get this medicine into people's hands.
Douglas, you dropped some diamonds in that, yeah. Right? And I mean, you dropped some big diamonds in there. And I mean, and I would like to quote one of my favorite people, which is Bob Marley, who said, decades ago that alcohol is the destruction of a nation, cannabis is the healing of the people. And I believe that, and I believe that now for most of my life. And 11 years into this game, or more than a decade into this cannabis space that we've been in, everything that you just said is exactly true. Authenticity, the ability to be resilient, because resilience, and especially in the beginning of an industry, this industry has changed so much since we opened up our first dispensary in 2009. I mean, the levels of testing, of how you purchase, of how it's tracked, of just the laws and regulations about putting things on your shelf. There is nothing today that is the same as it was 11 years ago. And you've got to be prepared. And I'm sure that 11 years from now, if we all got back together in Jamaica, by the way, we would discover that what we're doing today is dramatically different than what we're going to be doing a decade from now. So, you know, those are absolutely.
So let's do that, Wanda, for your 35th birthday in 11 years. Let's do that. Let's come together in Jamaica and celebrate.
There. Yeah.
Hey, we got to do that before 11 years. I'm thinking about the next, 3, 4, 5 months. Yeah, we got to make this work.
Love it. Love it.
No, but those are important things, and you are exactly correct, in moving that forward. So now that we're into this space and we're moving forward, what are some of the things and what are some of the advice that you would give to new entrepreneurs that are looking to get in today? Because it's very different, right? As you get in, the money goes up, the level of understanding goes up. So how do you carve out your corner of the world now for those folks that are listening that says, you know what, I think I want to do this? What's my first step?
Yeah. So Douglas, I don't know if you want to jump in there.
Yeah, sure. I get this question a lot, because of CannEx and all the different people I know in the network and so on and so forth, right? Throughout the Caribbean and what have you. And, the people default to, I have some land, so I'm thinking I want to get into the cannabis industry, right? And my take on them is, have you ever grown anything? Like, do you like the sun at 12 o'clock in the day? Are you willing to go out there and understand what's happening with your crop? And I say that not to dissuade them, because my prevailing point is, figure out what you want to do. Figure out where you have a skill set, or interest that you can impact, because whatever that is relevant to the cannabis industry. If you're a graphic artist and you love design, become specialized in the cannabis industry. If you are an accountant and you know what I mean? Do it for the cannabis industry. This industry is so young that you have these opportunities to carve out specialties around it without now thinking that you're going to become Farmer Joe and go grow cannabis if that's not your thing. If you love agriculture, if you love it, then absolutely go for it. But I think the most important thing is, have your head screwed on with some of the things we talked about earlier. But fundamentally is find what you love, find what you enjoy, find the thing that when it goes sideways on you, you're willing to take a power nap at 11:30 at night to get up at 1:30 in the morning to keep going again. Because if that's not what you're doing, it's going to be very difficult to succeed in this industry.
100%. Rumi, what do you think?
Yeah, just to piggyback off of that, I think that you have to have a passion for this business, right? And it's not just for business in general, right? It's for this business, right? I think that's a big part of it. And listen, it's not easy, right? Douglas and I can trade some stories about what it was like in our early days. But I think the main thing I would throw out there, pieces of advice, are to lean on your strengths, right? Like Douglas mentioned, there's so many talented people out there, right? And they're stuck in, maybe a job or an industry that they don't love, but they can come to cannabis and love this industry, right? It's open. One of the great things about the industry is that it's open to everyone, right? And some of my favorite people in the industry I've met, I've known for maybe less than a year or 2 years. And that goes to show you how big the potential is for this space. And we're going to work together on, a number of different things. And that shows you too, that you should be able to seek out people who have different skill sets than you do, right? So talk to people that are, great public speakers, or talk to people that know how to put together a great pitch deck, right? Or talk to people who've been on the other side of this, right? Who are, lifelong cultivators and they know, they know what they're talking about, right? I think one of the things that, I think Douglas brought up in a previous comment is that, there is competition, obviously, right? Like we're all competing against, whether it's a competing product or a competing, business. But for the most part, the people in this industry, I've never really felt that kind of competition, right? I've never felt like, hey, like, this CEO sitting across from me, or, this person who's in a different state, that they're really my competition, right? I think that that's something that shows you also the power of this industry, is that we've really constructed a big tent, and a lot of people are going to make it inside the tent. We'll have to kick some people out. They won't get invited to the parties. They won't get invited to CannEx Jamaica, but
Exactly.
it's gonna be self-selecting, right? It's gonna be interesting to see, right? Like that this is gonna be a self-selecting group, but we're open to everyone and everything they bring to the table. And I love talking to people who are just starting out on their journey. And I love talking to people who are, who have exited and, are now sipping Mai Tais, on some island. I love that too. It's a great, it's a great kind of spectrum, right?
So that's an interesting, part that you brought up too. And I've said that numerous times. I said that, I am nobody's competitor and I'm not competing with anybody. And the reason why is, back to Douglas's point, is this is a brand new industry. And we keep forgetting that, here in America, I mean, we only have 11 states that are fully legalized, 33 that are looking at are working with medical, cannabis. We have yet to have a true brand come out of cannabis. There are lots of brands that are building, but we don't have a Coca-Cola yet. We're on the way, but we're not there yet. So sometimes people talk to you and they're like, oh, you're the competitor. And I'm like, you need to lose that thought process about who you're competing with right now, because the only competition that you have right now is you and yourself and your internal company. What is it that you want to do? Because, in most places that we look at, there's still plenty of room on the shelves. There are still, outside of Colorado, there's plenty of rooms for all we can handle here. But even with Colorado being a mature market, and we have 717 dispensaries in a state of 5 million people, which is a mature market, but we also sold $2 billion worth of cannabis last year, right? So even with Colorado being where it's at, someone that comes up with a uniqueness or an energy to want to be able to move forward, can do so. And this is about a global market now, correct? You know what I mean? Putting products in Jamaica and in the Cayman and in, Canada and in Mexico. So we are definitely Israel, so we're definitely looking at what this looks like globally. So opening up your mind and not deciding what your competitors are, because we need to lose that word, especially as Black and brown operators. Is that something that you both feel?
Totally. I like a phrase I coined. It's not my phrase, but it's been used over history. It's a rising tide lifts all ships. And it's such a simple thing to say, but I think particularly that's what we need to galvanize around, help each other. This industry is what I love about the cannabis industry is it's really born out of community. It's only folks who entered in the last sort of 3, 4, 5 years who, they haven't yet caught up with the fact that you have to be, helpful and authentic and understand the value of the community. All the folks who've been in it before, I've been so fortunate. I mean, I reach out to all different types of people, including you, Wanda, a few times. You didn't write me back, but anyway, to sort of say,
are you going to call her out in the middle of the
but you just.
That's what you do. Once you get me right here, you call me out. That's what we do. I'll return the call.
No, but you see, I also believe everything happens when it's supposed to happen. Like I believe that as a principle. But you reach out because this community will support you. It will support you. It's not about picking one person and saying, "Oh, they didn't write me back, so it's the end of the road." You keep going. But that's the beauty of it. But I mean, one of the irony. Let's flip it around. I mean, what you've done for this industry as a woman of color, right, is something that a lot of people need to look at. And when they come to you, they're ready to go. I think that's another part that I see sometimes. Folks come to me and they're like, "I have an idea. Can you spend some time?" And I'm like, "No, develop your idea. Come with it a little bit more advanced, and I'm happily give you my time. But I value my time, but I also value the fact that if I'm really going to help you, come with the thing shaped a little bit more."
You know what?
But that's what I think is important, is to understand we're community.
Let's absolutely talk about that, because, you know, we're talking here today about how do you raise money. And let's be open and have that conversation. But, you know, it's surprising to me how big over this 11 years, you know, the name Simply Pure and myself and Scott have been able to be a part of this industry. Because 11 years ago, we did not see, I mean, we knew that this was going to be big, but who knew this, right? Who knew?
Mm-hmm.
So we do get a lot of people reaching out, and we're honored to be able to help when we can. But asking somebody or a CEO or somebody that is already running a company, can you help me write a business plan? The answer is no. And not that I don't want to help people write business plans, but that is the very basic part of business, right? And there is a point that you have to get to in business that you have to learn on your own, and that you have to bring in your resources, that you have to literally go to school to learn how to do those things. And you have to ask people appropriate questions to help you along your way, what's appropriate for that person that you're speaking to. I do not have time to help somebody with a business plan. And I'm not saying, Douglas, that's what you asked. I'm not saying there, but before you get in a company of having the opportunity to ask somebody, I mean, if I have the opportunity to sit in front of somebody that I know that is extremely wealthy and has the opportunity to help fund our business, because we're in a raise right now as well, I'm not going to ask them what their opinion is on, should I be making chocolates or should I be making gummies? That's not what they want to hear from me.
Exactly.
They need to come to them and say, look, we've researched, you know, what the chocolate sales are. We've researched what the gummy sales are. We've broken down how expensive it is to create those products and how many different places we can put those products. What we've decided as a company is that XYZ chocolate product is a better place for us because we work with chocolatiers. We've got, you know, African chocolate coming in. And can you invest in our chocolate idea? You know, then that person is like, yeah, that's interesting to me. Instead of me asking somebody that has $1 million, should I do chocolates or should I do gummies? That is something that we have to decide as a company and be prepared to lay it out for an investor. So make sure that you're asking the appropriate person the appropriate ask. And I think that that's really important for folks. And like you said, never give up, because once you get to a certain point in business, you have gatekeepers. Because if we spoke to everybody that wants to speak to us, and not saying that they're not valuable, they are, but we still have businesses to run. I still have investors to answer to. So our day is packed with different things. So give me the opportunity to help you, but you've got to come with the right question at the right time, which I think is really important for anybody that's looking to raise money, needs to understand.
Yeah, Wanda, I think that's a great point, right? You have to know.
And Wanda, you said something.
You have to know. Sorry, I had to finish the point, but you know, you really have to know your audience, right? So, right. Douglas and I have talked about this, and I'm sure we can have a long conversation about this. You know, when you know the people sitting at the other end of the table, right? Like they have, before they even come into that meeting, or they put you on a Zoom call, or they get you in front of their team, right? They want to gather as much information as possible to understand what the value is that you bring. And now, I mean, that's something that's a bigger challenge for people of color, for people that come from backgrounds that are maybe, you know, focused more on the production side of things, right? So the investment conversation, I've given a lot of advice to a lot of people, including high school students, right? And what I tell them is, you know, if you have a dream for your business, right, whether it's, you know, a shoe business or, you know, or like an app, right, you have to understand what people want to know about that business, right? It can be a great idea, but the stuff that's behind that idea is a lot of hard work, right? So putting together a business plan, it's not hard, right? And you can go online and find resources like Coursera, you know, you can talk to people, I think some of the best work you can do is with your peers, right? So like Douglas and I can talk at length about what works and what doesn't work. I think we should probably we could all start a support group for CEOs actually, if we wanted to, because with the challenges we face now are much different than the challenges, you know, we faced when we were first trying to get off the ground, right? So knowing your audience, it's really easy, right? You can go online, figure out what this person is already invested in, the types of businesses they like, you know, the things that are important to them if they've been interviewed in press, right? And that's just basic, you know, research. But on the flip side of that, I'd say one is when people do come to me and I see that they have that spark and they really, really believe in what they do. And it's one of them is a chocolatier, or could be somebody that's doing something in a space like beauty that we're not in. You know, I'm happy to talk to them about what I see, you know, the potential is. And maybe there's a partnership there for us as a company. But more than that, there's a person that I can now have who's a fan of mine, right? Like the best thing that ever happens to me is when I get an investor who comes to me because somebody recommended that they look at our business. And that's just good karma. Like, I don't know if Douglas feels that way about it, but, you know, I feel like I've done a lot to help others. And now I can see the benefit of that, you know, not just to me personally, but to the company.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, definitely, you know, well, I believe in karma. I believe it all comes around. But again, coming back to this industry, there's the energy around the plant. You know, you do good and good things will happen. You know, it's not easy. You can't give up, but you have to be prepared. And I think that's a part of the thing. You just mentioned that one. And that's a part of the setup here in looking for capital that you have to be really very clear on is what is your end game. And I don't mean exit, because, you know, people will tell you about their business plan. They haven't raised $1 yet, but they want to go out and ad infinitum about the exit plan. And you're like, well, why don't you build a business first, and then we could really drill down into the exit plan, right? But they just think that's what it is. And I think especially for it's applicable to any business, but particularly for minority businesses in this present climate, I think it's incredibly important that we come in prepared for what might happen. You know, you have a lot of SPACs right now that have a ton of capital, and very soon, you know, we can sort of look into what might happen with the Biden administration, and you start to see that, you know, the landscape may change from a federal perspective, whether it's the actual law, or it's more sort of like accommodation of and confidence to say we're not going to interfere with this, right? That's going to facilitate a lot more capital coming into the industry. And the reality of it is, how many of our businesses are ready for it? How many of our businesses have, you know, external accountants that have prepared our numbers? How many of our businesses have actual legal contracts that are all ready? So a person can say, you know, I have this IP, and they're like, great, where's the paperwork? No, I did it. Like I assure you, like it doesn't work like that. And you know, we need to get ourselves, again, this comes back to the team that you have around you, and you don't have to have your team in-house. You can have external folks who are expertise. And again, I go back to community. So you have a few things that you can look at. The community will help you. You know, you reach out and say, I'm looking for an IP lawyer. I'm looking for an auditor that understands. I'm looking for someone who can help me to get a, you know, a Reg A going, a Series A, whatever it is, right? But they're there. But you gotta get ready for whichever league you want to play in. If you want to play in Bush League, you know, organize yourself like a Bush League player. If you want to play in the Premier League, I follow, you know, UK football, right? Then you got to get ready, because it's a different set of requirements and expectations. But if you're ready, I humbly submit that this could be a very good opportunity, particularly for minority businesses, to be able to stand in line, to be able to participate in a much bigger capital opportunity that has previously existed.
I get upset sometimes when people know how lucky we have been in this industry. And my favorite quote is, luck has nothing to do with it. And my definition of luck is when opportunity meets preparedness. So we have been prepared to take advantage of every opportunity that comes our way over that last 11 years by exactly what you're talking about, having the accountants, having the team in place, having the legal in place. And I think that those are just some of the most amazing things that we can talk about. We're coming to the end of our hour, but one thing that you just brought up was the existence of SPACs and Reg A, and people need to, not Reg A, but Reg A. So people need to take a look at what all of those mean and how that's going to work in moving your companies forward and getting those teams together. So final word, what would you say are your top, let's go with 2, or let's go with 3. What are your top 3 must-do items for anybody, no matter where level you are trying to raise money at? What are your top 3 things that everybody that is raising, you know, $10 to, you know, $20 million, what is it that they need to know?
Be clear on what your business is. We can express it in 2 sentences.
Yep.
Be clear on what your point of differentiation is, and be able to express what your competence is to execute that plan. You and your team, what are your competencies to be able to do that? Those would be my 3.
Nice. Rumi?
Great. Yeah, I would say number 1 is to be organized. There's a lot of paperwork and, contracts, things like that. If you start off, I can tell you when I was on the investing side that if somebody's Dropbox was not organized, I could tell that that's probably not a good sign of how their business is run. So that's number 1. 2, try to make your life as easy as possible. So when it comes time to do things like send out term sheets or contracts, use digital ways, especially now with COVID, it's a good way to do that. And number 3 is really one of the things that's super critical, I think, is to have a plan, right? To put together a plan and try to execute on it. I think a lot of people, look at an opportunity and, they're prepared. They may have been preparing their whole lives to do one thing, but they may not be ready for everything that comes along with, growing their business, right? And that's where I think to piggyback on something that Douglas said is lean on other people, lean on your network, and go out there and ask those questions. I think a lot of people are a little afraid to put themselves out there. I know, Wanda, that you're not, right? You're really vocal, and that's a great thing. I think it's something that I had to learn myself is I've got to be out there. I've got to, put out what I'm doing into the world, and you'll see the kind of love and and support you'll get from friends, from people you don't even know, right? So yeah, that's a positive note. I think is to put yourself out there more.
I have been doing that from the very beginning. Folks have said, lay low, stay out of the limelight. And clearly we took the exact opposite. We've been talking about cannabis since 2009, back when the issue was not making money, but not going to jail. So it's been a sense of pride for us. It's how we've differentiated, our business. And that's exactly it. You've got to find out how to differentiate your business, how to stand out in this industry, and how to show a strong business acumen, because that is what I think in this industry is required to be able to raise money, is a strong business acumen. Give us the confidence that you know what it is that you are looking to do once somebody gives you $1 million or $20 million. On that note, gentlemen, we are getting ready to end this, but I would like to have a final thought on, what do you love about this industry? What do you see happening? And I hate doing the where you're going to be in 10 years, because I'm going to be in a yacht in Jamaica hanging out in 10 years. That's where I'm going to be. But where do you see, what does this look like 10 years from now? A decade from now, what does this industry look like?
Yeah, I could take that one. So not to piggyback off what you said, but just something in general, I don't like New Year's resolutions, but I think this year is going to be the year where I personally and my partners and the company have more fun. 2021 is going to be the year of fun. Mark my words, it's going to happen on a catamaran at CannEx in Jamaica. It's going to happen, whether we're in Wanda's smoking room or at some conference. But I think one of the things that people lose sight of is, when we work and we don't enjoy what we do, that's a real problem, right? But this industry, whether you're talking to a colleague or somebody who you've just met, at a conference, there's a lot of fun that can be had. And, I think that's one of the things about cannabis I enjoy so much is that we're all in this for obviously the business side of it, but there's also the community side of it, which is what, Douglas mentioned before, right? We're really a great, strong community, and it's a lot of fun. I think that's the one thing that sustains us, even in the darkest times when you're, beating your head up against the wall, trying to figure out how to solve a problem. You remember, hey, listen, we're here to have fun. We're here to improve people's lives, and that's what I love. I love hearing from people, getting emails about how they're, how they shared their product with their mother-in-law, and now their mother-in-law treats them better because they're sleeping better. I mean, it's a great thing, right? So.
That's Douglas, what do you think?
Yeah, here's the thing. We're operating in dog years. When I tell people that CannEx is about to celebrate its 5th anniversary, they're like, oh, Like it's, like I'm saying, it's 25 years. We operate in dog years in this industry. And I bet you, one, if I reverse this question to you, and I said, when you opened up in 2009, did you think we'd be where we are in 2020? And so projecting forward 10 years, great question, but I would just have to say, I have no idea. What I do know is this industry will be significantly larger than it is today. I do know that I inherently believe that we will start moving to a place where, we're approaching things from a more holistic perspective, and medicines and how we interact and how we look for cures for folks will fundamentally change. And so it's really more a function of understanding that it's large enough that you don't need to worry about, quote unquote, how large it's going to be. You need to focus on how are you going to impact people? How are you going to carve out a space that marries your personal skill set, expertise, desires with what can serve the larger community through this incredible industry? So that's my answer to it, Wanda. I mean, I didn't answer your question exactly as you like, but hopefully that will suffice in some way, shape, or form.
That was a good one.
But you're exactly right, because you're right. We don't know, where we're going to be. I do know that we won't be on Zoom, and that's the one thing that I am aware of. Gentlemen, where can we find you on social media?
Sure. So I'm at Rumi Cure on Instagram.
CannExJamaica.com.
Hold on, Rumi, go ahead.
So you go, Douglas.
You go. She said good looking first, so you go.
Oh man, that's a compliment coming from you, man. It's at Rumi Cure, so RUMICURE on Instagram, and then you can always find me on LinkedIn, RUMI. I think I'm the only Rumi in cannabis, the whirling dervish of cannabis.
I think you're one of 6 globally. So
I mean, me and Beyonce's daughter.
We're CannEx Jamaica. So, oh really?
Yeah,
okay.
Beyonce's daughter is named Rumi. So there you go.
Oh, nice. I didn't even know that. But yeah, I'm CannEx Jamaica, at CannEx Jamaica on all the different platforms. Yeah.
Well, gentlemen, I really want to thank you today for this amazing conversation. And I think what we've learned today is be a part of the industry, dive in, know what you're doing, create your team, be authentic. And I hope that you all take a chance or take some time to reach out to both Rumi and Douglas, and you can reach out to myself at Wanda L. James on Instagram, Facebook, and IG, and of course, Simply Pure and simplypure.com. This has been amazing. I like to thank Green Enterprise for this conversation today, because it's important for us to see what's happening, just not in the United States, but globally as people of color, as we dive into what 2021 looks like and beyond in cannabis. So gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us today. I was going to say on this cold, blistering winter, but not all of us are in the cold, Douglas. So
that's right.
We appreciate everybody's time. And thank you all so much for joining us today. And we look forward to doing this more often.